All right, so there's interiority and exteriority. These are of a boundary, or you could call it a membrane. Interiority and exteriority have to do with the masculine and feminine, and the boundary has to do with consciousness. If you look at a boundary that could determine whether to let in or out some aspect of reality, then you're looking at what essentially is a Maxwell's demon, doing a selection process to reduce entropy. So if you look at this Maxwell's demon membrane entity, as the determining factor for what consciousness is, then you can see that there's different levels of consciousness that have to do with different types of things that can be let in and not let in. So, and also you can see that there are things that have an interiority and exteriority that do not do a choosing, that are just a physical membrane. And you could say that they're conscious because they have interiority and exteriority, but it's like conscious to the degree that they are conscious, you know what I mean? So it's like, how much consciousness would you expect a rock to have? Well, that's about how much consciousness a rock has, right? So this choosing process that we're participating in, inside of us, there's different modes that we can switch in and out of. You know, I have a way of making coffee. I switch into that mode when I'm making coffee, and a way to drive, and I switch into that mode when I go to drive, and a way to, text, and I switch into texting when I am texting. And if I'm in driving mode and all of a sudden I start shifting into texting mode, that's when accidents happen, right? So there are these sectors inside of ourselves that are somewhat shielded from our choosing for them, but also somewhat pervious. We can get things in and out of those modes and alter them, change them, and we can also select which one we're using at what time. Now the question comes up, are those conscious? And the answer I'd give is they're conscious to the level that they are conscious, which is, what are they able to be shielded from and what are they not able to be shielded from? So they're like little semi-consciousnesses inside of us. We're switching between. There's larger and smaller ones. And we are that membrane that they are all on the inside of. So you can see these layers of them stack, right? So you can go to work and go into work function mode, and then you can start writing an email, and inside of work function mode you're writing an email and an email writing mode, and those are all inside of what you are. And inside of that you can get into spelling mode, right? And all of these things, they're nested inside of each other. They're different functions, and each of them has an interiority and an exteriority and can choose to some extent what's in and out, but they choose at the level that they choose, right? So there's things that they actually cannot choose, and but at the level of the human, the whole human person, this is why we say that human lives are sacred. There's a kind of choosing that's of a different type than all the rest of anything that we've ever come in contact with. There's a question concerning aliens, but that's just about it. Except that all of the ancients and everything always are talking about angels. So what's that angels thing, and Nephilim, and demons, all that kind of stuff? Well, if you take a look at a blade of grass, that blade of grass has an interiority and exteriority, and so it has a membrane. It can do some form of choosing, and of course it chooses at the level that it chooses at, which is not much. It's just a blade of grass. But if you look at all grass, all together as a whole thing, well, there's an interiority to grassness and an exteriority to it that's unified under this one single heading that we cannot see inside of. We can't really change grassiness. Like, grassiness is kind of what it is. It has a hiddenness from us. It has an identity that's not us, and so that we can also call a consciousness. And you might say, well, that's kind of silly. I mean, consciousness is associated with, like, you know, processing, and it doesn't seem like grassiness is doing much processing. And of course, grassiness actually is doing a lot of processing. It's just that it's happening over very large time scales. And, you know, we live one lifetime, and we do our interiority, exteriority choosing over the course of that one lifetime. But grass can do an interiority, exteriority choosing over the course of thousands of years, millions of years, because grassiness survives that long. And so the feedback loop is much larger. It takes a long time for the feedback to actually reach up to that unifying principle of grassiness, and then back down again to its implementation. But it still occurs, and this is why you can see things like in plants where they look like hummingbirds, etc., is because they are using much time scale wise inferior methods of like perceiving reality, but they are still perceiving reality and creating conceptions of what's around them, seeing essentially through, you know, whatever material means that they are making use of as eyes and ears and whatnot. But they are actually beings that have an interiority and exteriority, and so we can give them what we can call consciousness. Now, this brings up an interesting question, because it seems like, okay, so any particular human has consciousness, but what about all of humanity? Does all of humanity in total have consciousness, like as a whole thing, like just the same way that blades of grass all together have consciousness? Does all of humanity all together have consciousness? Like, is there such a thing as like humanityness? And I think the answer is yes, but it's like twofold answer, right? There's one that was a consequence of the fall. All right. There's one that's just humanness as a process, as a cognitive being. And then there's this certain other thing where God himself becomes man and becomes the I'm not sure that you would say that he is that manniness, the humanityness, but if he's not, he at the very least causes us to be under something that is under him, right? So like you could say that's the church, or Mary, or something like this. But just the same way that we choose to integrate with our lower aspects, our capacity to spell and write emails and drive and whatnot, Christ, in coming to earth and becoming man, is likewise unifying with us at that level, and becoming something like either the consciousness of humanness, or that thing which is just above the consciousness of humanness, something like that. And of course this creates a problem, because now there's two of them. Like there's humanness, the one that you connect yourself to when you sin, and there's humanness, the one that you connect yourself to when you join yourself to the image of Christ. And that's essentially what salvation history is about, and also gives us a pretty clear definition of what the Antichrist is going to look like, because the Antichrist, it seems to me, is going to be something like the final, as perfect as can be, incarnation of humaniness without being under Christ. Yeah, I don't know, just a couple of thoughts.